Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to talk to you about the new Tamron 150 to 600 millimeter. This is an f5 to f6.3 lens. It has Tamron's VC, which is image stabilization. It has its USD ultrasonic drive motor, and this is the new G2 or version 2, generation 2 of a very popular lens, and that was Tamron's first generation 150 to 600 millimeter lens. When the version 1 of this lens was introduced a little less than 4 years ago, it really caused a stir in the photography community, because before, if you wanted to have that kind of reach, you were into very expensive lenses. And so the Tamron, it presented an affordable lens that reached all the way up to 600 millimeters designed for a full frame camera. While still being affordable, it came in, its original list price was $10.99, and so it came in at an affordable price. It also, it performed quite well. And since that point, of course, there's been other competitors that come. Canon has released the 100 to 400 millimeter version 2 of that lens, and Nikon has released a 200 to 500 millimeter. And then, of course, Sigma has released its own 150 to 600 millimeter variants, both in the contemporary and the sport option. I have reviewed all of those save the Nikon lens, and so I'm familiar with them all, with what they bring to the table. And while the best of the bunch optically are the ones that have a little bit more narrow focal range, the Canon and the Nikon, the reality is that all of them are pretty close optically. And despite this being kind of the one that started it all in terms of this new generation of lenses, it's held up really quite well. It's not to say that they didn't have shortcomings, however, and in a second episode we're going to examine kind of the distinct differences between these two, and how that the version 2 has or has not improved upon the shortcomings of the original. The biggest thing that people lamented about was that at 600 millimeters the image quality was quite a bit softer, and if you stopped it down to f8 it would improve significantly. But a lot of people wanted to shoot at f6.3 and get sharp results. So has the generation 2 improved that? We're going to take a look at that. At the same time, other things it included was that when the Sigma Sport came, it came with a more robust weather sealing to it. It also had a better build quality overall than what the original Tamron did. At the same time, some people would like to have seen a little bit faster autofocus, a little bit better image stabilization performance, all of those things. And one other kind of physical difference that people noted is that the original version, it could be locked at 150 millimeters, and then if you zoomed it out to 400 millimeters, it could be locked there. But it couldn't be locked anywhere else. And so if you tried to do that, it wouldn't work. And so you had only two options for where you could lock the particular lens. That has really changed when it comes to the G2 version, which, while it has the traditional lock like the original did, I'm not using that very much because it has kind of a clutch mechanism that if you've ever used a Tokina lens, Tokina lenses use a clutch to allow you to switch between autofocus and manual focus. This has something similar, except for it's not for focus at all, but rather it is for locking. And so at any point, you can just click that locking mechanism out and you can lock in. So that way, if you're carrying in a harness, and by the way, you want to carry in a harness if you're going to carry lenses like this all day. Using this cotton carrier harness system that I was using, I shot on Thursday. I went for 3 straight hours shooting all handheld. I covered about 8 kilometers over the time that I was shooting, and not to say that I felt completely fresh at the end, but I wasn't really fatigued at all, and having this to just kind of rest this weight and distribute it across your body, it makes a huge difference. And if you're going to shoot lenses like this, I think it's pretty wise to invest in something like a cotton carrier. I'll throw a link to it down below. But anyway, what it means is that if you have it and you're wanting to shoot at a specific focal length, you've got that locked in, it means that when you go to shoot, you can be ready to go right at that preset focal length, and without having to worry about it, and without having to worry about the lens creeping down and kind of getting in your way. And so that's a really nice additional feature that comes to this new lens, and so I'm really happy about that. It has the design language of Canon's SP line, which means it has a much sleeker, more modern look. and at the same time it has a more robust weather sealing, and so that makes it ready to compete with the Sigma Sport when it comes to that. At the same time, it's also offered up some more modes. Instead of having 3 switches, it now has 4 switches, and so adding to kind of the basic focus limiter, autofocus, manual focus switch, which by the way, you don't have to switch that. It has full-time manual override, and then an on and off for the VC, but now it gives you an option for different modes for using the VC. And so the ones out of the box are the standard one in position 1. In the second position, it's one for panning, and so it turns off one axis of stabilization, and so you can move along and follow a fast-moving object. And the third mode is one that Tamron has been starting to use through the tapping console, which in mode 3, it basically does not show stabilization in the viewfinder. Stabilization kicks right on when you engage the shutter. And so through the system, Tamron actually claims an additional half to 3/4 stop of image stabilization. I do find, however, that I prefer having stabilization in the viewfinder with such a long focal length like this. That's a long focal length to have to kind of hand hold, and so I prefer, but in certain situations, maybe shooting off of a monopod or something like that, you may find that the mode 3 is better for you. Kind of a big deal for this redesign is that this becomes the first zoom lens that is compatible with Tamron's tapping console. And what that means is that now you can customize autofocus as well as other features, the focus limiter, and at the same time you can also do some tweaking to the various VC modes. But the big deal is that you can set the focus, you can calibrate focus at 3 different focus distances, but at 6 different focal lengths. And so you can set, one at 150 millimeters, you can set a position of minimum focus, medium distance, and infinity. And then of course you could go all the way up through, you could, do 300 millimeters, you could do 500 millimeters, 600 millimeters, and any other focal length that you prefer in between. And so if you have kind of a preferred distance that you shoot, in other words, you end up with a total of 24 different calibration points you can add. So that represents some time invested, but if you are a serious wildlife or bird and flight shooter, I think it's well worth your time and that little bit of money. It's about $60 for that console because it makes a huge difference in the autofocus accuracy. And the Tamron lenses that I own that are compatible with that, I have found that I've been able to tweak autofocus to where I'm getting better, more consistent autofocus results than I've ever gotten from a third-party lens before. So that's pretty fantastic. And then the other thing, it's maybe a smaller thing, but while it's still not as nice as as Sigma's cases for lenses, at least it kind of goes like Canon L lens style with a very similar kind of sock. And so while it's only slightly better than nothing, it is slightly better than nothing. And so that's also a step in the right direction. To the downsides, there are really very, very few downsides. As far as the autofocus is definitely improved, and there's definitely more focus speed on the long end. I'll be doing some direct comparison between the two when it comes to that. But I certainly know from having experience shooting the version 1 that I didn't really notice a slowdown towards the long end on the G2 version. It just autofocuses really, really quickly, and so that's certainly a plus. I was able to do some quality AF servo tracking with it and was successful in that. But as far as the downsides, it has put on a little bit of weight, but really it's probably not enough to be all that noticeable. The original was 1,950 grams. This new one is 2,010 grams. So a 60-gram difference, but when you're talking about this kind of weight, I don't think physically you're going to notice. I've got a friend that I let handle this lens this morning. She owns this one, and she said, "Oh, it feels lighter." And I said, "Actually, it's a little bit heavier." But I think she was accustomed to feeling the weight mounted on a camera body, and so that was, it's not lighter. It's a little bit heavier, but it's not significantly so. It's also a little bit more expensive. Instead of the list price of $10.99, this one is $13.99. However, I think that its feature set and its improved optical performance means that it's actually quite a budget alternative to, say, the Sigma Sport version or the Canon 100-400 L2. And so it certainly, I think, is very deserving of its price tag. We'll see if that impacts sales or not. One other thing on the positive side is that Tamron has redesigned the plate for the tripod mount. And by the way, the tripod mount still is fully removable, and so that's a plus for those of you that prefer to do most of your shooting handheld, which I do. And so the only reason that I have it kept on is because I do like being able to throw it into a harness like this. But they have updated and improved the actual tripod collar mount to being compatible with Arca Swiss plates, and so it's all ready for that. So it's more robust, and I also find it makes for a better handle than what the old one did, and so I've carried it quite a bit like that already. Overall, this is a very intriguing lens, and I've already got an image gallery going down below if you want to take a look there to the various things I've been shooting. I have this only for a really brief period. It's only in my hands for a week before I've got to send it back. But I do have both these lenses on hand for this week, and I'll be doing some direct comparison and bringing you my final verdict. Fortunately, a lens that I'm pretty familiar with in its overall aspects, and so I'll be able to focus more on the actual physical improvements to it. And so keep watching for that. That will be coming soon, along with ongoing coverage of the 5D Mark IV, which I'm about to wrap up and bring you my final verdict, and then still continuing to work on my review of the new 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 Mark III. All of that stuff well worth watching, and so keep an eye on what's going on. I'm Dustin Abbott. You can follow me on social media down below. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.